Statements will be included in the record. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature
Without
of
objection, the amendment in the nature of a substitute will be considered as read and shall be considered base text for the purposes of amendment. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas to explain the amendment.
This amendment makes technical changes to the bill and ensures aliens are placed in removal proceedings as expeditiously as possible. I yield.
Gentleman yields back. Who seeks recognition? Gentlelady from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report. Point of order reserved by the gentleman from Arizona.
amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR.
Amendment will be considered as read. The gentlelady from Washington is recognized to explain her amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to be clear about something. Our immigration court backlog today stands at 3.8 million cases. It takes someone the better part of a decade to finally have their day in immigration court. And this bill, without investing any resources in changing that system to rid the backlog first, just overloads an already overloaded system with a ridiculous 15-day timeline. That's why my amendment would require the Executive Office of Immigration Review to have the necessary number of immigration judges and support staff in place to actually adjudicate all these immigration hearings before putting this absurd 15-day timeline in place, to at least try to ensure that this bill is implemented in a slightly more responsible way. We all know that the current backlog and wait times are way too long and unfair to the people who have legitimate asylum claims or other claims for relief. We all understand and agree that it doesn't make sense for people without a legitimate claim to be in the United States for years, and that is something that we would work collectively on with the other side. It's also why, when we were in the majority, Democrats tried to move legislation that would actually make the real structural reforms that our immigration courts needed to work. We advanced legislation that would make our immigration courts completely independent to take politics out of the system. We worked to ensure that children have counsel so that they can navigate immigration court proceedings. No one wants to see children as young as 3 or 4 years old trying to defend themselves alone in any court. We fully funded the legal orientation program in detention, which actually makes our courts operate more efficiently by helping people better articulate their claims or even realize that they don't have a viable claim for relief. We need fair and orderly and timely adjudications of immigration court cases. Those are the kinds of reforms that we need to actually make the immigration courts function. But this bill does absolutely none of those things. Instead, it just places an arbitrary, unworkable timeline on all court cases. It is a completely unfunded mandate dedicating no actual resources to its implementation. Immigration judges face daunting caseloads. Over 100 judges have been fired or pushed out by the Trump administration, despite historic case backlogs. And we now have roughly 685 immigration judges, which is not nearly enough to handle current caseloads. It simply would not be possible for the existing number of immigration judges to handle adjudicating the cases in the backlog within 15 days from start to finish, let alone the new cases that are being added. So for this bill to be feasible, we need more judges. And in a cruel and harsh irony, that would likely require the Attorney General to waive certain provisions from the Republicans' Big Bad Betrayal Bill, which did cap the number of immigration judges at 800 starting on November 1st, 2028. But even that number, 800, would be woefully insufficient to carry out the requirements of this bill. None of this is the kind of thoughtful approach that we need. This is really the opposite. Even putting aside the unfunded mandate and the complete inability to implement this bill, it is the opposite of ensuring access to justice and due process. It's actually just bad policy. Remember that because immigration proceedings are civil proceedings, not criminal proceedings, there is no right to counsel in immigration proceedings. So just imagine that you are given a charging document that places you into removal proceedings. Under this bill, if you want to hire an attorney or find a pro bono attorney, you need to find one in a matter of hours, You need to figure out what form of relief you're going to apply for. You need to prepare for trial in one of the most complex areas of law in the United States, and you need to be prepared with testimony and witnesses before a seasoned ICE attorney. Under this bill, trials must commence, quote, as expeditiously as possible once the notice to appear is filed within the immigration court. And then you've got 15 days from the beginning of proceedings until the end. So to put this in perspective, the form to apply for asylum alone is 12 pages long. Asylum applications, which consist of affidavits, country conditions reports, expert testimony, primary source documents, and more, are often hundreds of pages long and can take months to compile. That's not to mention the trust that attorneys have to develop with clients to understand their relief claims. Imagine being a survivor of torture or sexual assault and having to relive all of that trauma with a total stranger in under 15 days. I sincerely hope my colleagues will consider accepting this amendment. It won't completely fix the bill, but it will go a long way to ensure that it's done in a somewhat more responsible way. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I oppose the gentlelady's amendment. She
Withdraw
mentioned...
your point of order. I think you had a
I'm sorry.
withdraw your point of order.
Yeah, I withdraw the point of order. I'm sorry. Move strike last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you so much. And I oppose the gentlelady's amendment. She raised the specter of a 3-year-old going in to testify. Well, here's the way it works. If you were under the Biden administration, they would give you over to ORR. You would be placed with an unvetted sponsor, never to be seen again. Over 400,000, according to the Office of Inspector General. 58,000 of them under the age of 12. They never made it to their court dates for that little child. Why? Because they'd probably been trafficked. So while we're justifiably concerned about what happened in the Epstein case, I find it intriguing that the Democrats never bothered to raise this particular issue. It was always the Republicans. And that's when you actually had the ORR director come in to our subcommittee and admit she had no idea where more than 300,000 of those children were. She admitted that. But what happens now, which was supposed to happen then, is a guardian ad litem gets appointed to represent and manage the child's interest. That's what happens. So when you start talking about children, you better at least know what happens there. And so to support that, Mr. Chairman, I'll submit this article called DHS Inspector General, 448,000 unaccompanied kids transferred under Biden.
Without objection.
Thank you. Now, what else? What else has to happen here? Under the Biden administration, those of us who live along the border and spent many, many days and nights on the border talking to people coming in from over 165 different nations, from San Diego to McAllen. These individuals had no idea why they were coming other than they were told they could come in and receive basically a new life in America. That's what was happening. And the women were being trafficked and the children were being trafficked. And if you'd never seen rape trees, then you didn't get on to the border. You probably shouldn't be talking about this. It's real easy to talk about this stuff from off the border. It's not real easy to talk about it when you've been to the border and spend a lot of time on the border. And these folks, many of them coming in, literally millions and millions, which is why you have a backlog that went from about 1 million to 4 million. That's your backlog. And the reason that that's happened is because the previous administration let the world in and told them. That's why if you went over to Tijuana, you'd see in the square right there in the Zocalo, you're going to see people wearing "Let Us In, Joe Biden" t-shirts. That's what happened. And these folks should be removed. you actually have more than 1 million people, probably about 1.5 million now, who actually have removal orders. But we've lost them. We've lost them. The Biden administration had like 1.2 million, and they didn't remove them because they said, well, you know, whether you have a removal order or not, we're not going to remove you. In fact, the Secretary of DHS at the time said, just because you have a removal order, if you don't have some other serious crime, we're not going to remove you. That vitiates the rule of law and undermines our sovereignty and undermines the very notion of a nation state. That's what happened under Joe Biden. I view what Mr. Nels is trying to do here as simply trying to move this thing forward and acknowledge that you have a major problem, and these folks who have come here illegally, and that is the term of art, they are illegal aliens, should be removed and should get their process as swiftly as possible, and then they can go back to their home country. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to oppose this amendment. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Question occurs on the amendment offered. Gentlelady from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lord have mercy, what a day. So I do support the amendment, and I'm going to yield some time to my colleague from Washington State. But first, I just have to say we're talking about, I think, girls on the border and being trafficked. And I guess I represent a border state, California. And we have a corridor in my district called the Figueroa Corridor, where teenage girls, as young as 11, are being trafficked on the streets in all kinds of inappropriate wear, and sometimes not hardly wearing anything at all. And they're being trafficked by these pimps to pedophiles who are knowingly having sex with 11-year-olds and 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds and 14-year-olds. And sometimes they're girls and sometimes they're boys. And most of them are from the foster care system. And I'm going to tell you something else. We have AUSAs, we have DAs that have been trying to work on getting rid of these traffickers, trying to help these young girls and young boys, trying to get rid of the prostitution and the trafficking happening on the corridor. But you know what's happened? Department of Homeland Security and Kristi Noem have called off these AUSAs and these DAs from working on these cases because they don't care about these girls. They want these people gooned up, running into churches, running into kindergartens, snatching parents and kids and detaining them unlawfully to deport them because somebody is looking for a TV show of terror. So I don't need nobody today talking to me about how we need to be trying to help some victims when you have prosecutors who've been working on these cases for years calling our office saying, can you do something? Because the case I've been working on, and I'm about to get these bad guys, I've been called off of because Homeland Security needs another TV show coming out of MacArthur Park. So give me a break. And with that, I will yield the rest of my time to Congresswoman Jayapal.
Thank you to the gentlelady from California. And with respect to my colleague from Arizona, maybe you've never been in a court where they have minor children who are there. Well, I don't understand how you could say it's not happening, because I was in the court room at the hearing. I sat through the entire docket. It's called a kid's docket. And what's happening there is these kids who are 2 and 3 years old are hugging teddy bears and putting their head on the side of the pews, the benches, just trying to understand what's going on. And a judge is reading them their rights and saying, you have the right to be represented. I want to make sure you understand. You have the right to question the government. You have the right, blah, blah, blah. A kid, 3, 4 years old, is going to do that? That's not due process. That's a farce. And to my colleague from California's point, this article, this is an investigation by the New York Times. The department, dated November 16th, 2025, the Department of Homeland Security has diverted thousands of federal agents from their normal duties to focus on arresting undocumented immigrants, undermining a wide range of law enforcement operations in response to mounting pressure from President Trump. Homeland Security agents investigating sexual crimes against children have been redeployed to the immigrant crackdown for weeks at a time, hampering their pursuit of child predators. And federal efforts to combat human smuggling and sex trafficking have languished, with investigators reassigned to help staff deportation efforts. And it goes on to say that Homeland Security investigators worked approximately 33% fewer hours on child exploitation cases from February through April compared to their average in prior years. So please don't tell us that we don't care about kids who are sexually exploited or trafficked. That is ridiculous. And this bill makes no sense because it's saying you gotta overload the system when there aren't any judges to take care of it. There's no resources invested, and it makes absolutely no sense.
The lady's time has expired.
I yield back.
Is there further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, the question is on the amendment offered by the gentle lady from Washington. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. The noes appear to have